Greetings everyone, Doc Russell here, and in this video we are going to talk about base building in 7 Days to Die. It seems the most popular topic people ask somehow involves base building, such as where to build, what type of base to build, what strategy to use, and so on. And frankly, base building isn't something really to cover just in one video. I could do a whole series on it. Who knows, maybe I will. And if so, the first video needs to be not on how to build a base, but on strategy. Cannot effectively build a base if you don't have a game plan on how you're going to play and what you're going to accomplish. So let's start with the two basic questions and then spend the rest of the video explaining what they mean and how to answer them. The first question is, do you want an all-in-one base or two separate bases? An all-in-one base is where you have one base that does everything. It's resource storage, crafting, Horde Night defending, food center, etc. Having two separate bases means you will have one that's your home, and then a separate one for Horde Night defense. The second question is, how will you approach Horde Night? Are you going to be killing zombies yourself? Will you use automated defenses to kill zombies? Or are you just trying to survive? If the second question confuses you as to why it's one of the two vital questions of strategy, then this video is certainly for you. Before we even start to answer these two questions, let's take a step back and look at the big picture of 7 Days to Die. I see a lot of forum questions such as, my base completely fell apart on Horde Night, how do I prevent that? I can't tell you what went wrong with your base without seeing it in action, but I am reasonably sure that you didn't have a full strategy for the two questions I just asked. I can tell you that most bases that I've seen fail do so because of greed. What I mean is that 7 Days to Die is a survival game, not a zombie killing game, yes I'll explain that, and usually the base that falls focuses on killing zombies and or gaining XP from killing zombies, rather than focusing on actually surviving the Horde Night. Now yes, you can earn a lot of XP from killing zombies yourself on Horde Night, but it also puts you at risk. Admittedly, not much risk for the first few Horde Nights, but later on when tougher zombies are more prevalent and attack non-stop for the full 6 hours, or more depending on your settings, you need to have a base that can withstand the attack and have several backup plans for if your base falls. So first things first, remember that this is a survival game. Your goal is to survive. Killing zombies or how the zombies die is secondary. It doesn't mean that you don't try to gain a lot of XP from Horde Night, but you do not sacrifice yourself for the sake of the XP. So let's get back to the questions. First question is, do you do an all-in-one base or separate bases? For clarity, I refer to the two bases as a Horde Night base and a resource center, since all my resources and crafting is done there. Each strategy has its own advantages and disadvantages. The all-in-one base means less duplication of effort and everything at one location, so no forgetting something at your resource center that you actually need for Horde Night, such as leaving all your healing items behind. The disadvantage of the all-in-one base is that if your Horde Night base falls, so does your resource center, and you may lose a lot of valuable things that you've worked hard for. This especially factors into the normal mode, called survival mode gameplay, where you have to earn everything. Now in the cheat mode, also known as creative mode, the all-in-one base is very common since you really don't need a resource center since you can just take anything you want to from the menu. The two separate base concept has an advantage in that if your Horde Night base falls, you still have your loot and your crafting stations. Now there is no right or wrong answer, but you should have decided this in the beginning. Now I've played plenty of both. I've done plenty of singles and I've done plenty of multi-base setups. I remember a big playthrough I did on Alpha 16 where I did an all-in-one base and it worked out great. Then I used the two base design and it worked great as well. Now more recently I've gone back to usually the all-in-one strategy. Another thing to consider is where you put your bedroll for the two base setup. It would likely go into your resource center most of the time, but then you have to decide what to do with that on Horde Night. Do you want to move it to the Horde base so that you respawn there in case you die? Or do you want it away from there in case your base falls, and that is why you died, in which case you would be respawning in the middle of rubble with nothing to defend yourself. Now normally when you die on Horde Night, the Horde itself stops, so that you are not caught in an endless death loop or respawning in the middle of the zombie infestation. That being the case, the all-in-one base has more merit. Remember that the goal of the zombies, from their perspective, their goal is to kill you. Their goal is not to pillage your base. Remember, this is not Valheim. If they get to you without destroying your storage or your resources, they're fine with that. Remember, they are zombies, not Vikings. One approach I've used with great success is to use an all-in-one base with my resource center below ground, and then I fight from above ground usually at a second story level, so it's kind of a combination of the two strategies. If you go with 2 separate bases, or frankly more than 2 if you want, I've done 5 in one playthrough, you need to think about how far apart you want to place them. Some people swear by the 2-base strategy and want the 2 bases a long ways apart, as in 200 meters or more, quarter mile or more. Frankly, I don't see the need for that much separation. I actually did a Horde Knight base that was 7 blocks away from my resource center and never had an issue the entire game. If you haven't done a 2-base approach, you may want them a little further apart in case your plan didn't work out the way mine did. Just see what works best for you. If you have an underground tunnel between the two, or a second story walkway between the two, zombies may actually break into your resource center on Horde Knight since it's more likely to be less fortified, and then use that tunnel or walkway to get to your Horde Knight base. The trick to the separate base strategy is to truly separate them. The purpose of the 2 bases is to protect your resource center, so remove any zombie incentive to damage it on Horde Night. That being said, I do hang out in my resource center on most nights early in the game and cook food and craft items, so it needs to have some level of defense, typically just that wandering horde. Regardless of how you answer the first question, the second question is how you approach Horde Night, killing zombies yourself, using automated defenses like spikes and turrets, or just surviving. This doesn't mean that a base built to take a severe beating can't also be used to take XP, but late game zombies can do a lot of damage. If you have 6 hours of nurse zombies and dogs, you can let them beat on your walls and it'll probably last a very long time. But against demolition zombies, etc., you may want to proactively snipe them before they get too close to your walls. My strategy is survival first, kill zombies second. Now, in cheat mode, which frankly I rarely play, I find this very easy by building a base that's at least 5 blocks thick in all directions and 6 blocks high. I give it a catwalk that overhangs the whole base so I can shoot down through the bars and take out the zombies with guns. But again, frankly, I hardly ever play cheat mode. In survival mode, I don't always have the resources to make that much for high-end walls myself in the very beginning, so I may make walls that are 2 blocks thick. Perhaps then leave a little space, 2-3 blocks, and then make another ring that's 2 blocks thick and then repeat. I've done this strategy a few times and then fill in that space between the layers with iron spikes. Or you can just make a solid wall. With this strategy, when I then have the resources, I can go back and upgrade the walls to cement, steel, etc., since I still have access to both sides of the wall since they're only 2 thick. If they were 5 thick, I could never get to those middle layers. Demolition zombies apparently have a blast radius of about 5 blocks, so 2 walls and then a space of 3 will save you your investment of so many walls. If you are aiming to just survive the Horde Night, then lots of walls and spikes are your friends. Use your ammo just on the high-end zombies. It seems that even once a wall is breached, or if you intentionally leave a clear path, some zombies will still try to beat on the outside walls rather than come around through the obvious opening. I give zombies plenty of walls to occupy their time regardless of the survival or creative mode. I also look out for protection from above, as birds often attack on Horde Night as well. Have a ceiling to your base, especially if you are defending from a second level. One tip for purely surviving is to intentionally not kill the weaker zombies, since they will do less damage and they fill up that quota of the maximum number of zombies available. If you only have 16 zombies on Horde Night, and you let all the incoming dogs live, you'll soon have 4 or 5, 6 maybe, of those 16 slots filled with dogs, which won't do as much damage against the walls as a lot of the stronger zombies. So, 1 base versus 2, surviving the Horde Night versus gaining lots of XP. Let's take a look on how to approach each one. An all-in-one base has your resource center that you'll likely have as the most protected area, so probably at the center of your base. It can be elevated above ground, at ground, or again in my preference, below ground. I'm a big fan of not fighting at ground level myself. I prefer to be up on a second level while the zombies are at ground level below me. I can use an elevated platform where there is nothing on the ground except for the pillars and of course spikes, or I can make solid walls for them to beat on, or both, with a pillar base that has an outside wall. In that case, the outer wall is not crucial, so if they get through it, it's really no big deal, it was just there to slow them down. If you are above ground and your resource center is below ground, the odds of losing your resource center is low. Remember, the zombies are only after you. If you stay away from your resource center, so will they. With 2 separate bases, your Horde Night base does not need to have a center of the base, so it can be more flexible if part of it falls. For example, Make several pillar bases with only one space between them, and that way if one collapses, the rest of the pillars are still standing. Or connect them with wood frames, since those will break away. Your resource center still needs to be able to survive an attack, so some spike traps and moderately strong walls are still in order. You can search YouTube for lots of videos on base building, but be careful on some older videos as the zombie intelligence may be outdated. For example, zombie tactics have changed a lot just from Alpha 16 to Alpha 17. I know that was a few years ago, but in Alpha 16, the zombies were about as smart as my left shoe. I watched a zombie not too far from my base walk toward me, came up on a large stone, and rather than walk around it, it literally tried to go through it. It took over a week of clawing at it, but it finally hollowed out a hole down the middle and made it through. Now in Alpha 17, zombies got their degree in physics and structural engineering and took the path of least resistance to get to you, as well as they did a lot more damage. For Horde Night strategy, you need to weigh your various surviving options versus making XP. Remember that you only get XP if you make the final necessary act to kill them. If you shoot a zombie several times but a spike trap finishes them off, you get no XP, since the trap did the final blow. On the other hand, if the trap does most of the damage and you finish them off with a single shot or a melee strike, you get the full XP from the kill. My recommendation is to make a horde base that can still survive a beating. As for some base design strategy, always have at least one block of overhang to stop zombies from standing on top of other zombies and just jumping over the walls. It also helps with spider zombies jumping over the walls. Another optional tactic is to use pillars so you can shoot between them. So with all this said, what approach do I take? Well, I've done both a single base design and a two separate base design. In fact, I have one of each going on right now. But all in all, I've actually done more of the single base design. As far as my Horde Night approach, which significantly affects my base design, I go for a base that can take a beating first and then kill zombies second. My resources are underground, so nothing at ground level. And then I fight from a second level with somewhere I can protect me from the vultures. Well, usually, sometimes I forget. As far as why some of the bases fail, some of the images I've seen are of an existing wood house with one layer of wood spikes around it. Well, the lifespan of those wooden spikes on Horde Night can be measured in fractions of a second. At a bare minimum, go to the second story of the house and remove the stairs so the zombies cannot get to you quickly. Zombies want the path of least resistance to you. If there is no path, they will try to get to the closest proximity to you. So if you're on a second level with no direct path, they will try to be directly underneath you. I use this to my advantage on solid bases and just lure them into the iron spikes as needed. Now, what would a YouTube video be without something controversial? So let me pass along a controversial strategy for Horde Night. If you die on Horde Night, the Horde stops as long as you stay in the game. If you exit the game after the Horde ends, but before morning, the Horde will start again when you continue the game. So, what some have done, and let me be clear that I'm not endorsing this strategy, but it could be used as a factor on how or if you create a Horde Night base, is to stay away from your resource center and who cares if you die. Yes, it will negatively affect your game stage if you die, but the theory is that it's only one death, and the drop in game stage is better than the loss of what you have already built up. Again, I'm not endorsing this strategy, but as long as we are reviewing base strategy, I thought I'd at least mention this nomadic strategy as well. Now, if you've done any kind of research into the single base design or the multi-base design or things like that, you've probably seen a lot of comments from people that are just absolutely adamant you have to do this design. I think the loudest crowd is the one that says you have to have the two separate bases. You absolutely cannot combine them. And that's fine, but you have to be you. You've got to use your strategy, your gameplay, how you're going to approach it. Again, video games are for your entertainment, not for someone else's. So you've got to look at all the information and decide for yourself what's the best strategy, what's best for you. If I'm playing solo, I can do one way. Maybe I use a different strategy if I'm playing a group game, for example. So I just wanted to use this video to kind of approach the base building from a kind of like a prerequisite thought point is not what base do I build, but before I even get to that, what's the strategy I want to use? And then I can start looking at a bunch of videos as far as blade traps versus killing corridors versus whatever on how to actually accomplish that. So hopefully everyone found this one useful. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, subscribe, use smoke signals, and do everything else to make the video more popular. Until then, good day and happy gaming.